Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, a very special episode, 111.
That's amazing.
That is amazing, isn't it?
Have we got to that already?
We have got to that already. And in fact, I took my daughter out for breakfast for her birthday yesterday, and we passed a house whose roadside letterbox was 111, and I thought, that's what we're up to. Wow. It's a really long road, and I thought that is amazing. So anyway, look, we're already distracted. So our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir, science fiction and picture book writer, voracious reader of many genres, your founder and co-host in fact, coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country today.
And I am Laurie Bell, science fiction and fantasy author, blogger, short story and flash fiction writer, reviewer, and your co-host today as well, coming to you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country.
Which is a beautiful part of the world. And in fact, did you know, Laurie, that, and this is via the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, that it is April to July in the Eastern Kulin calendar marks warring wombat season. And this is when wombats emerge to graze in the gentle sunshine and are most active for a scuffle.
I have to admit, we tend to see more of them on the side of the road.
Also admit
about
that
this time of year too. It's cold too.
Yeah, the Macedon Ranges, sadly, a lot of them have not got great road sense. Yeah. You might also, however, be able to spot male lyrebirds performing their courtship display around this time. So if you are up around the hills from the Dandenong Ranges, I think there's quite a fair few up there. I haven't seen any around here for many a long time, but there you go. All right, so that was your factoid for the day. In fact, I've got one more factoid for you because as I've been rereading Ochre Dragon, which is book one of my series, in preparation for what I hope is like the almost final editing of Soulstar, book two. And realise that I've learned a lot about grammar. Things in 4 years. And I found this little factoid about the N dash and the M dash, which I didn't know. You may know. But did you know that the N dash, the EN dash, is approximately the length of the letter N for Nelly. And the M dash, the length of the letter M. So the shorter N dash is used to mark ranges, so with the meaning to, in phrases like, the Dover to Calais crossing, and the longer M dash is used to separate extra information or mark a break in a sentence, kind of another sort of a breath or pause or something like that. Yeah.
The M dash is my favorite.
I love an M dash.
I put it in it. My editors hate me because the M dash is my hero, and there are so many M dashes in the book that take the place of every kind of punctuation. Basically, I use the M dash. That's my punctuation. So I am a big fan of the M dash, and my editors hate me for my use of the M dash.
There you go.
So there's a little factoid for you.
There is a little factoid to go with that, but no, I love an M dash. But I realised, of course, that I'd used N dash instead of M dash, so that was very poor formatting.
It's the one thing that annoys me with the keyboard is that there's not an M dash, because I use it everywhere and there's no M dash, so I have to copy and paste it.
Yes.
And have that ready to just paste in as I go. Which
is good. In Scrivener, if you double tap the N dash, it makes an M dash, which is great. Nice. Which is a good thing. Yeah. The thing I remember most from the first book being edited is that she said I had a comma splice infestation.
We've all got something. For me, it's the M dash. You're a comma splice. That's
It just made it sound like, I can see what you mean. Because once it's pointed out, you go, what was I thinking? But that's the value of editors. So, yeah.
Oh, I love my editors. And with my young adult series, my editors are actually American. So it is
Ah,
hilarious to me
right.
because
Yes.
sentence structure is very different
Yes.
with American English to Australian English,
Yes.
very much
Yes.
so. And yes, my poor editors will quite often say, "What is this? Where, did you mean to end this there?" Probably not.
Well, my first editor was a Kiwi, and I had to explain some of the Australian terms like billabong and a willy willy, which is a little tornado-y thing. Anyway, we're moving aside from
Sorry,
things.
we're doing it again.
We are doing it again. I think we're
Yes.
ready for some news.
Okay, so what have I got for you? All right. The AG department seeks information from rights holders with Australia. So that is the Attorney General's department is seeking information from stakeholders, shareholders on how copyright materials are currently being used in Australia as inputs for AI systems, or could potentially be used as such in the future. So there's a questionnaire that's available. You can actually jump onto it from the info I've got is from the ASA, so the ASA website. So they're not looking for information about users of copyright material, Australian in particular, as AI inputs outside of Australia. They're looking for inside Australia at the moment with their questionnaire. So, and it's really difficult because a lot of those websites that are pinching everyone's words, they don't tell you whose words they've pinched. So it is very hard for the copyright owner to actually say this site is using this part of what have you.
Yeah.
So it's a tricky one to do with the questionnaire. You've got to have that sort of proof that's really hard to get because they're very secretive on purpose.
They are. I remember when it first started to happen, there was a couple of websites where you could type in your book and see whether they had sampled it. I have to see if we can find
Well, that's the
those.
American
Yeah.
website. So there's a
Okay, but
Books
not
3.
Australian. Yeah.
Yeah. And so they're looking specifically for Australian at the moment. So
Right. Okay.
if you have that, jump on the website and submit your questionnaire.
Yep. Good.
They are definitely looking into it. And there was a Creative Australia's Visiting International Publishers Forum again this year that's happened, and they were talking crime, younger readers, and unexpected successes.
Nice.
With trends in crime, market updates, that young readers are still engaged, which I personally love to hear that particular bit. And it's funny, I have many nieces and nephews and young children of various friends of mine that are all at reading age, and they talk about books because they know I love books and that I'm always talking about books. So whenever I see them, they talk books with me, which is absolutely great. So yes, I think that's that's a good forum that is chatting about that sort of thing. And it's actually interesting, this week in Victoria, students at Victorian state schools, it's now been announced that public schools are going to go back to phonics and phonic courses for the younger readers.
Interesting.
So this was, and as a ex-preppy teacher, I was particularly interested in this one and hearing about it because phonics is massively important, and why they moved away from it drives me absolutely balmy. But they're moving back to it, which is really good. And kids do like to sound out words and how words are used and those sound, the ths and the shushes and the chus and all the different sounds with specifics with phonics does really help kids with early reading. So I'm really happy to hear that that's coming back. Apparently that's coming back from next year, but there's no mandate to make the private schools do it. It's only through the Victorian public schools. So I guess we'll have to see how that goes.
Yes, because the private schools are in a little bit of turmoil at the moment, but let's not touch on that. What other news have you got for us in bookish stuff?
I think that's really
That's
the
it?
main ones that
I
I had for you for today. I could talk about the phonics stuff for hours.
All right.
So
all right, let's save that for a children's book episode. Let's think about, I have got some news about the Minister for Infrastructure, so Tony Burke.
yes.
and got this on Twitter. The Albanese government's continuing the revival of the arts sector, which is fantastic. We know that got, Creative Australia got some time. First Nations art will support and promote Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander arts practice, enhancing sustainable career pathways for young First Nations people in the arts and increase opportunities to grow First Nations audiences, which is fantastic. It's going to be overseen by the First Nations Board, who will have autonomy over the allocation of funds and support and invest in Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander arts and promote best practice in First Nations cultural protocols and principles, which will be great. And as well, Writing Australia, which it was going to be Writers Australia, but they've changed the name. Okay. We can live with that. We'll strengthen the Australian literature section and develop further markets and audiences here and overseas through targeted investment and the development of national industry initiatives. It will increase opportunities for authors, illustrators and publishers to create new works and tell new stories, and it will be overseen by the Writing Australia Council. And the establishment of these two new bodies follows extensive consultation led by Creative Australia, which is fantastic. First Nations art will commence this year. Writing Australia will commence in 2025. So this is a good thing.
Absolutely. No, that's great.
Now, I'm very rudely looking to find a...
While you're doing that, I did have one last one that I
Give us one last one, yes.
Online this morning, actually.
Yes.
So the Sydney Authors Inked are excited to announce that the wonderful Veronica Strachan will be joining us for a chat on the 4th of August. Veronica is a powerhouse in the writing community and one of the co-hosts and founders of the Australian Book Lovers.
There you go.
That's up online. So 4th of August.
Beautiful.
Very exciting.
You're going to think this is hilarious. That's exactly what I was looking for. What's the date? What's the date? So thank you so much to Sydney Authors Inc. So I know Maria P. Frino and Conchita Gus Santiago and Hayley Walsh and all of that crew up there. Thank you so much for inviting me. And yes, I will be there. So I'm going to have a long weekend with the hubby and visit my niece and have a chat with some writers. And hey, talk words in it. I'm really sorry that I'm bouncing the desk up and down. I must stop being so excited and just, be calm. And very nice of them to say that I'm a powerhouse, but at 63. Okay, I'll take it. I was
doing my scroll and I thought, I must mention that.
This is good. All right, I have got another fabulous one. Now, I claim this is kind of local because Austin P. Sheehan does live near me. Deadset Press has a short story anthology, a new one. He's got actually they've got two. So they've got, the one I saw was Revolutions and Rainbows. So this is their new anthology, an Australasian queer speculative anthology to celebrate Pride, and will be open to all Australian and New Zealand authors who identify as LGBTQIA+ from any gender identity, and also ally authors. So they want stories to feature LGBTQIA+ characters of any gender identity across wide universes of speculative fiction. Swashbuckling pirates, mischievous necromancers, charming elder gods, dashing bounty hunters, anything goes. There you go. So it's a celebration of Pride. It's the anthology will be edited by Leanne Pearson, Alistair Ott, and of course Austin P. Sheehan. Submissions are open now until the 30th of October, and they will not accept AI written stories. All contributors are going to receive a payment of $25 per story. The preferred length is between 4,000 and 6,000 words, but it's just a guideline. They won't auto-reject stories based on word count alone. So there you go, which is fantastic.
Right. That's wonderful. I love their anthologies.
They do some really great
stunning
stuff.
Ones. Yeah. So cool.
They made a call last year for neurodivergent stories for Embrace the Silence anthology, but got kind of fairly busy when there was a call sort of globally. I think I might have even been an American anthology, made a call for neurodivergent voices, but only if they had a medical diagnosis. And of course, in this country it can take 2 years to find the truth about ourselves, and at great cost. So Deadset Press wanted to have an alternative. And EJ Dawson, another great supporter of the podcast and Australian Book Lovers, who also used to live locally, but no, she's gone up to New South Wales now to be with her family. That's okay, but we miss her down here. She used to catch up occasionally. And helping create a neurodiverse apocalyptic anthology called Embrace the Silence. of course, like many other neurodivergent folk, they had lots of other commitments, but they're reopening submissions as well. So that's fantastic. So the idea behind the title, Embracing the Silence, refers to characters accepting and embracing their neurodiversity, as well as adapting to a changing and challenging new world. There you go.
That's fantastic. Sorry, I was a tad distracted there with
Oh,
one mau that decided to stick her tail in my nose.
oh, I missed that completely.
You did miss that. You'll see it when you're editing and you will laugh. It's like, excuse me. Okay, I'll give you attention. There you go.
Yeah, she's happy. All right. There was quite a lot of news because, of course, we didn't do news last episode because we had the fabulous Andrea Butler, Kirsten Hunter, and chatted to them all about the writers in the writers' room about crime.
Yes, so how wonderful that was, and just how the variety of their writing as well, not just their crime novels, but the kids' books and the screenplays, and it was so much fun to talk about. And actually, then I realized, go on. Well, I was going to say our lovely interviewee today, Les Zig, he also does some screenplay work, and we chat about that. Yes. So yes, I think you'll really enjoy that chat. And
another multi-talented author. Oh, it is very exciting to have your first one. I did realize, of course, that when I was editing the episode, which I didn't take anything out, I was just wish I'd asked that. I forgot to ask that. I forgot to ask that. But anyway, that's okay. It is out there. And for our listeners and watchers, because of course you can listen on all of your podcasting channels and watch on YouTube, but you can now also watch on Spotify. So Spotify has taken video. So for The Last Writers Lounge, it takes a while on my very slow internet here to upload it, but you can also listen and watch on Spotify now, which is fantastic. So there you go.
Fantastic.
Even more for me to do. I think I'm going to have to get a faster computer.
Time for an upgrade.
All right. Now, as well as Sydney Authors Inc., as well as the Writing Australia, as well as Rebels and Rainbows and Embrace the Silence, it's actually via Sandy Barker. Apparently, it's Audiobook Appreciation Month.
I saw that too.
Yes. And of course, Sandy's books, Match Me If You Can, Shout Out to My Ex and The One That I Want, are out on audiobook. So I must have a bit of a listen to those, could get those from the library. And the final one is that Book Fair Australia is looking for new and established authors, bookish vendors, and other related merchants at publishers, bookstores, etc., to exhibit at their event, 2nd to 3rd of November at the Sydney Showground in Sydney Olympic Park, and you'll be able to meet and network with other exhibitors, reach out to book lovers coming through the doors with one goal in mind.
Books.
Yes. So bookfairaustralia.com/exhibitor application. Have a bit of a look at that. I wish it was in August when I was going up to Sydney Authors Inc., which is on the little big house up there. Tickets on Humanitix, people. If you want to come and see me in real life and realise how short I am, or how much older I look in real life, because of course they're glamorous Zoom as I am on a Saturday morning here with no makeup. So Humanitix. Anyway, there you go.
Yep.
All right, and look, I just had really quickly festivals. July 13, Riverina Festival, New South Wales. July 18 to 21, the Mildura Writers Festival in Vic. And the Apollo Bay Word Fest is on 26th to 28th of July. And this one is good. We might have to meet up with this one. The 25th to 27th of July, the Rare Book Fair, Wilson Hall in Melbourne. So yes, maybe we'll have a little wander around and see what we can do. So there you go. And if you're looking for writing competitions and all of those kind of places, Vine Leaves Press have got a writing competition on. It's for non-fiction, and it's not always good competitions for non-fiction. So the 2025 International Voices in Creative Non-Fiction Competition, and welcome submissions from marginalised voices. So there you go. Have a look at there. So vineleavespress.com, and $25 an entry. The cash prize is $1,000 at plus publication of the Winning Leaves, of the manuscript by Winning Leaves Press, which is great. Runners-up could also be considered. So there you go. Cool. And Magnetic Island Nature Care Association have an environmental writing competition. So it relates to the environment of Magnetic Island, of course, which is off the coast of northern Australia, northeast Australia, and any form. Open to people 18 above, juniors, anyone under 18, 1,500 words. Everybody each winner receives $150. opens the 1st of June, so it's open but closes the 31st of July. So www.minca.org. So
Wow.
if you need some milestones or things to look
Yeah.
at, there's festivals, there's competitions, there's lots happening.
Well, this week I actually shout out to Truganina College in
Ah.
Victoria. This week I actually judged one of their writing competitions. So for the
Ooh.
13 to 16-year-olds. So that was a lot of fun. And I did a little presentation this week during the week. So
Fantastic.
keep writing, kids. It is amazing work you're producing at the moment.
That's very good. What did they have to write for you? Was it an essay?
It was open. Yeah, it was open, just short. So I had a number of non-fiction pieces to read, plus quite a few fiction pieces, and yeah, they were great. I was really impressed with a lot of their really beautiful descriptive sentences and opening and closing sentences as well. Really impressed. So that, yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Good. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Well done, Truganina College. Excellent.
Yes.
Time for some book spotlights.
Yes.
Book spotlights. We have another 4, and I was madly putting up the which one will be in the next episode. But we have Crossing Continents, which is a cycling odyssey from Norway to Spain by Russell Nankervis, and this is a memoir. It's a tale of enduring hardships and chasing sunsets on a 7,000-kilometre bike ride across Europe by bike, of course. Russell, as an experienced cyclist, decided that he needed to complete a cycling journey that was equally ambitious and terrifyingly bold. He placed his finger on a tiny landmark at the tip of Norway named Nordkapp, and with a quick Google search, the tiny coastal town of Tarifa in Spain became the destined finish point. A complete crossing of Europe from the northernmost point of the Arctic Norway to the southernmost deserts of Spain. This is a story of perseverance and the power of the mind as Russell learns how to overcome endless challenges in order to keep his wheels moving south. Between being blown off his bike on a remote Arctic island, pedalling across Europe's highest peaks, and crossing sunburnt deserts with cowboys. This is a true unscripted cycling adventure to inspire those who wish to travel more adventurously.
Now I'll have to get a copy of those for my uncle. They're all bike riders.
Yeah, well, they probably love that and understand the blisters and the sunburn. And
very much so. My cousin was actually in the Olympics as a mountain bike rider. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's a bit of cycling in that side of the family. So I'll have to let him know about this one.
Sounds good.
Let me tell you a bit about Russell. So Russell Nankervis has ridden and raced bikes in all sorts of weird and wonderful places, from competing internationally in cross-country mountain biking. I wonder if he actually has met my cousin. To cycle tours across Asia and Europe. He has a passion for sharing travel stories that would otherwise be forgotten. And his most recent adventure has been collecting stories from Cape to Cape, crossing of Europe, where he cycled unsupported from Arctic Norway to southern Spain. And you can read about that 7,000-kilometre trek in his book, Crossing Continents. So very fascinating. Fascinating.
People are very adventurous. They really are. Yeah. Okay, and here's another one that's a little bit adventurous, another memoir we have again, Once Around the Sun, From Cambodia to Tibet by Jessica Muddit. So while nursing a broken heart at the age of 25, Jessica Muddit sets off from Melbourne for a year of solo backpacking through Asia. She spent 6 years at university, yet still has no idea what she's going to do with the rest of her life. She just knows that she's profoundly curious about other cultures and hungry for new experiences. Her willingness to try almost anything quickly lands her in a scrape in Cambodia. With the nation's tragic history continuing to play out in the form of widespread poverty, Jessica looks for ways to make a positive impact. She crosses overland into a remote part of Laos where friendships form fast and jungle adventures await. Vietnam is an intoxicating sensory overload, and the hedonism of the backpacking scene reaches new heights. Jessica is awed by the scale and beauty of China, but she has underestimated the language barrier and begins her time there feeling lost and lonely. In circumstances that take her by surprise, Jessica finds herself hiking to Mount Everest Base Camp in Tibet.
Wow. So Jessica Muddit is the author of 2 memoirs and the founder of Hembury Books. Her first book is called Our Home in Myanmar and was published in 2021. Her second book is Once Around the Sun, From Cambodia to Tibet. It's a 2-part series with Kathmandu and the Khyber Pass coming in 2025. Hembury Books provides non-fiction authors with coaching, editing and self-publishing services. Jessica is a former journalist whose articles have been published by Forbes, BBC, GQ and Mary Claire, among others. She spent 10 years working as a journalist in London, Bangladesh and Myanmar. Before returning home in 2016, she lives in Sydney with her 2 daughters and 2 cats.
Oh, we love her already, don't we?
I just got clawed by one of my cats, so I'm very impressed I held that together.
That was very good. All right. Book 3 in the spotlight, and I love this title, The Girl Who Broke the World. So this is book 1 in the Rimwalker series by Renee Hayes, and it's a YA dystopian magical fantasy. Do humans deserve a second chance after reaching the world's resource limits, decimating the forests and destroying the earth that has given them life? Find out in book 1 of the magical YA Rimwalker series. In 2032, the world as we know it is no more. The earth sighs in relief as billions are stripped from her surface. Ooh, very few humans survive. From the ashes of the old earth, a new world arises, a world of magic, shapeshifters, earth guardians, and a new humanity. A world where nothing and no one are as they seem, including the 18-year-old hunter Zamira Credence. Her powers can break this world or save it from a new threat that is emerging, one far more dangerous than any human. Will Zamira fall prey to the same darkness within her, or will she defeat this new menace that now threatens everyone and everything?
Oh, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you heard that scratching at the door, but that is my cat trying to get in. We're going to ignore that and go on.
Good luck.
Tell us, tell us about Renee.
Yes, so Renee is a fantasy weaver, wordsmith, and dream architect. So
Love that.
I know, don't love it. Immerse yourself in worlds of magic and mystery with Publishers Weekly rising star Renee Hayes. As a true dream architect, Renee crafts captivating tales that transport readers to realms where the extraordinary becomes reality. With a boundless imagination and a heart that beats for fantasy, Renee weaves enchanting stories that resonate with both young and new adults. From daring heroines to mythical creatures, her characters come alive on the pages, inviting you to journey alongside them. And I don't know if you could hear that, but that's my cats playing with boxes at the moment. Whether it's uncovering hidden secrets, battling ancient forces, or embracing the power within, Renee's narratives explore the depths of courage and the wonders of the unknown. Her spellbinding prose and vivid words will sweep you off your feet and into a world of endless possibility. And she's on Facebook with Renee Hayes Author. That's ReneeHayes Author. And I'm sure many other places too that you can find her.
Yes, she's got some great books out, which is fantastic. All right, the final one in our showcase today is The Pact by Lisa Heideke. Apologies, Lisa, if that's not how you pronounce your name. But this is a contemporary story. Samantha and Anne Callahan are successful doubles champion, the toast of the Olympics, Wimbledon and Flushing Meadow. But they're Flushing Meadow, is that the one in America? That
Yes,
really
yeah.
Okay. But their winning partnership spirals out of control when Annie's new boyfriend announces their engagement at the Australian Open in Melbourne.
Ooh.
He persuades her to ditch Samantha in favour of a singles career, but her game and rankings plummet. Samantha is left floundering. Disillusioned, her only sweet spot is the growing passion between her and Bear, the sister's coach. Amidst rising anger and betrayal, Samantha changes both their destinies when she does the unthinkable after a devastating Wimbledon loss. And I don't know what that is, but now I'm thinking, what could it be?
Yeah.
The sisters are driven to create new lives by confronting the past and taking control of the present. But can Samantha and Annie both win? And Lisa chose to make Samantha and Annie doubles tennis champions to amplify the usual sibling issues and then explore their professional partnership and personal relationships, similarities, differences, motivation, competition, abandonment, and grief. Nice use of N dashes there, by the way. And how they each respond to the stress of constantly being under the media spotlight. What happens when at the pinnacle of fame, it all falls apart? With dreams shattered and eggs destroyed, egos. Oh my God, sorry. Egos destroyed. How do they cope? Not good. So Lisa has an older sister, and although their report isn't as dramatic or as close for that matter, she was able to draw on the similarities and differences to bring a nuanced perspective to Samantha and Annie's relationship. She had a lot of fun writing the story and hopes the Pact resonates with readers, even if they don't play tennis or know much about the game. Well, I've just, shown that I know pretty much zippity-doo-dah about the game. All right, tell us a little bit about Lisa.
So, with several previously published novels under her name, Lisa Heideke, her 7th novel, Lily's Little Flower Shop, was published by Bloodhound Books in the UK in 2021 under her pen name Lisa Darcy. It has since been published in France as L'Adorable Boutique de Fleurs de Lily, and in Italy, oh my goodness, okay, as Il Piccolo Negozio di Floridi. I probably completely mangled that. Yeah, oh, very nice. In 2021. Her Big Greek Holiday was also published by Bloodhound Books in the UK. It has since been published in Slovenia, and Should You Keep a Secret was published by Bloodhound Books UK in 2022. Goodness, so many books. Short stories, so she's contributed a short story, Esmeralda's Heartfelt Christmas, to an anthology, The Heart Will Find a Way, published by Southern Key Press in 2024. And she's also taught creative writing at the Australian Writers' Centre, or shout out, in Sydney, and South Coast Writing Centre, Wollongong. Presents workshops and writing retreats, and has been on panels at the RWA conferences, GenreCon, and many Australian and international writers' festivals. In March 2024, she facilitated a week-long writing retreat, Unleash Your Creativity in Tuscany. Wow.
Ooh,
imagine
that would have
being
been
able to do
nice.
something like that. That is brilliant.
More
And
exciting
so-
than going down to the Bellarine Peninsula or something, really, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So you can find her on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Threads and TikTok as Lisa Darcy Author.
Beautiful.
So look
Wow.
up some more details. Wow.
Some great books there, and many more. And don't forget, if you have a book, whether you are traditionally published or indie, and we really encourage indie publishers to jump on board, come along, go to australianboooklovers.com/for-authors and upload the details. It is absolutely free. We don't take any commission from your book, except if you're with Amazon or Booktopia. We take a commission if the sale comes from the website, from the publisher side, from the retailer side. So the authors do not miss a single penny, which we know is incredibly important, but it does help us. Just a little tiny trickle comes through, which is very helpful for all of the supporting of the website and the podcast, which it's not cheap. It's getting a bit more expensive these days. It's
tough, particularly postage. Postage of all our lovely winners for our newsletter, which we will have some newsletters coming out shortly.
Absolutely.
So subscribe and get your entries in. I think you're going to show me a giant pile.
Oh yes, are you ready?
There.
See if I can do it without dropping it on my head.
We have a huge list, look at that, of books to send out to our subscribers. So please subscribe and you'll go in the monthly draw.
Indeed. I'll just do a few this time and a few next.
And then also, if you do find us via YouTube, like and subscribe, join the group, join us. We actually might even have a writers workshop coming up. So hopefully we'll have those details up, and we'd love for all of our regular listeners to join us or join in, maybe do some writing.
Yes,
that'll be so
fantastic.
Exciting.
It will. And we'll have details, and they'll be out in. We'll probably put it on socials first as soon as we lock in a date with our fabulous host, co-host, author, facilitator, I guess. Facilitator, and we'll put it in the newsletter so that all our loyal newsletter friends get notified spot on into their inbox. So
fantastic.
I think it's time to listen to your chat with
fabulous Les. I'm going to very quickly read the lovely Les's bio, because I think I actually, first interview, very nervous, I think I might have forgotten. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Les now, and then we
Okay.
can jump straight into the
Sounds good.
interview.
Sounds good.
Les Zig is a novelist, screenwriter, and speaker. He has 5 published novels. Just Another Week in Suburbia explores the questions of trust, fidelity, and how well you can ever truly know another person. While August Falling is a story about unconditional acceptance, reclaiming the past, and finding a way forward. And Prudence, which is an exploration of fidelity, temptation, and our darkest desires. As Lazaros Zigomanis, he wrote the YA novel Song of the Curlew, a story about dreams, coming of age, community love, and racism. And it has been described by best-selling young adult author George Ivanov as an extraordinary book. His new YA novel, This, tells the story of a 15-year-old dealing with burgeoning neuroses as he navigates social pressures, high school obligation, and his overbearing Greek parents. Les is also a writer and director behind the half-hour satire mockumentary Little Diva Rising, which met with great success on the independent festival circuit, and the web series The Abnorms, a preternatural take on life in lockdown during the pandemic. He also wrote and directed the short action film The Other Side of Paradise. So he's very versatile. He's had 4 screenplays optioned and a raft of unproduced screenplays place in over 100 competitions.
Wow.
His stories and articles have also been published extensively. A lifetime writer, Les has a love of storytelling and has always wanted to tell stories. And you'll see through the interview, it is just wonderful getting Les on a topic and just listening to him speak. It is absolutely fabulous. So I hope you enjoy the interview with the wonderful Les Zig. I want to give a very, very big warm welcome to everybody and a huge thank you for joining us to the Australian Book Lovers podcast tonight. I'm Laurie Bell, science fiction and fantasy author, Friday Fictioneer, reader, and your co-host, I should say host today because it's just myself, coming to you from Wurrung country. And I have the very great pleasure today of introducing all of you to the amazing Les Zig, and we'll talk about all of his marvelous books. He's an author of 5 books, and I'm going to grab your bio right now so that I can read that properly because I did have that right in front of me. So let me tell you a little bit about Les Zig. He's a novelist, screenwriter, and speaker. He has 5 published novels. Just Another Week in Suburbia explores the questions of trust, fidelity, and how well you can ever truly know another person. While August Falling is a story about unconditional acceptance, reclaiming the past, and finding a way forward. And Prudence, which is an exploration of fidelity, temptation, and our darkest desires. As Lazaros Zigomanis, he wrote the young adult novel Song of the Curlew, a story about dreams, coming of age, community, love, and racism. It has been described by best-selling young adult author George Ivanov as an extraordinary book. And his new YA novel, This, tells the story of a 15-year-old dealing with burgeoning neuroses as he navigates social pressures, high school obligations, and his overbearing Greek parents. Les is also the writer and director behind the half-hour satire mockumentary Little Diva Rising, which met with great success on the independent festival circuit, and the web series The Abnorms, a preternatural take on life in lockdown during the pandemic. He also wrote and directed the short action film The Other Side of Paradise. He's had 4 screenplays optioned and a raft of unproduced screenplays place in over 100 competitions. His stories and articles have also been published extensively. A lifetime writer, Les has a love of storytelling and has always wanted to tell stories. Les, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me on.
Now, I want to talk about many of the different things that have popped up in your bio there because everything is absolutely fascinating to me. But let's talk about your latest novel, This. So I'll just give you a quick read of the blurb here, which is in first person, which I absolutely love, and I can't wait to get into this. So this is about a 15-year-old, and I'll just read this. So, I don't get this. I don't have anything to worry about. I'm 15 and in year 10. But when I wake up one night, terrified, it starts a journey of trying to find out what's wrong. I can't go to mum and dad. We don't talk about things like this. And kids would at school make fun of me if they knew. So it's scurrying around like nothing's wrong while everything's coming apart. I don't get this. Wow, that is a fantastic intro to this book. Please tell me more about it.
This is extremely biographical. So in the 80s, I had a lot of mental health issues as a teenager. And in the 80s, no one talked about mental health. It was very heavily stigmatized. So you didn't advertise it with other kids. And anyone knew of it. If the only things people knew about mental health, or the connotations were, if you had mental health issues, you're crazy. So it was something you really just buried as much as you could. And there was no literature that was coming out. There was no internet to research it. Nowadays we have organizations like Beyond Blue and that. Nothing like that was accessible. So I had a lot of stuff going on as I went through high school, and I had no idea what it was. And it really sort of came to a head in my later teens. And this just takes pretty much all those experiences and condenses it into a single school year. So, like, I don't know, I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head, pretty much all the mental health stuff in the book happened to me almost identically. So it's all drawn from real experiences, and the rest is drawn from high school experiences too, with some extrapolation and some, creative license, being an author and all that sort of stuff. But it was really important to me because I really wanted to tell a story about mental health where it wasn't depicted as a quirk or as a charming character idiosyncrasy, which I think sometimes it gets misportrayed or misrepresented in literature and in film and television and that sort of stuff. And when I went through it, it was terrifying. I had no idea what was happening. So I wanted to write a story where people could read it and they could connect to the character, but sort of follow him on his journey and realize, look, because I didn't know at the time, but there's always another day, as the cliche would go. So, but at the time when I was going through this stuff, it just seemed like every day was going to be the last day of either my sanity or my life.
Do you think it's important to have more and more books really delving into these heavy topics, because they can be quite heavy?
Oh, I was just going to say, I mean, one of my favorite books, if not my favorite book, is Catcher in the Rye. And that goes into some really deep stuff, but it does it in a acerbic, blackly comic way. So you're absorbing a lot of stuff without realizing how heavy it is, because you're just following this kid's journey as he's trying to get home. But as he's trying to get home, he's trying to work through all the stuff in his head. And you probably, like when I first read it, I wouldn't have thought as deeply about it as I do now when I've read it as an adult. So I think you can portray that stuff without, communicating a hopelessness or just making it totally dreary and stuff like that. And the reality is, life is often just blackly comic, there's always stuff that happens that's funny, despite how heavy the circumstances around us are.
Have you done any talks with schools at all in relation to this?
Not with the book. I'm still trying to get those. In the past, I did do speaking for Beyond Blue and for St. Victoria about depression, anxiety, and mental health stuff in general. And I sort of took a little break from that. And this book was always a passion project for me because it was so personal, so close to my own life in so many different ways. And not just the mental health stuff, but I mean also growing up in a Greek Orthodox family, which it can be overbearing at times. And then you just get the stuff in high school, which is what every teenager goes through. You got the peer group pressure, you got what do people think of me, all those things that seem like end of the world when you're 15, 16. And then when you look back and as an adult and think, I probably didn't have to take that as seriously as as I took it at the time, or I could have maybe been a little bit smarter, but obviously that's part of growing up and learning more about ourselves and finding out who we are.
Well, you mentioned because in the book there you mentioned that lovely Greek parents perhaps overbearing. Was that very much drawn on your own
Oh, that's entirely,
cultural
yeah.
experiences just with Australian schools and having?
Yeah. I mean, my school where I grew up, I don't know if I should give it a shout out because it's quite different now, but that whole area was very European. So predominantly the students were Greek, Macedonian, or Italian, and like you had a handful of Australians and handful of Lebanese and Turkish and all that stuff, but it was predominantly, like I said, Greek, Macedonian, and Italian. So you really felt that sense of community among uh, people who understood your own cultural background and stuff like that. So that was a little bit easier in a lot of ways. And there's probably not so much those culture clashes in the book because I didn't think that was really important to focus on. But in terms of internally what you feel in that sort of family, it's something where, like I would sort of say, like with my parents, they're always loving and I'll support you no matter what. But then there's a flip side where they tend to be very pessimistic, and they're not malicious or anything like that. But I look at them and think they came to Australia in the 50s, didn't speak the language, had a roll of the dice to come to this country to create a better life for their kids or the kids that they would have. Could only really get menial jobs because they didn't speak the language. And like I think it's pretty much like an all or nothing they've thrown in. So I can understand why in the back of their heads they're constantly thinking, have we done the right thing? What if it doesn't work out? And then also catastrophizing anything, like that all the possible dangers. So, and like I always say, like I said, they'll support me no matter what. But the flip side of that, is you get this narrative constantly of, oh, don't go out at night, this will happen, or don't do this, or don't. So, like I said, it's never malicious. It's just their fears manifesting.
Yeah. Yep. And so did you really explore that through? And with your other books, do you explore that through your writing?
Yeah. I mean, the one thing that's a pretty prevalent thread through all my books so far is characters trying to find their place in the world, characters trying to reclaim ownership of their lives through, different situations. I mean, in this, the protagonist, it's just but it's a situation of a teenager trying to find his way while all this stuff is going on. And in this, it was really important to me that there was nothing circumstantial in it that could be attributed as the reason he's feeling mental health. Because when I had all my stuff, it just happened. It wasn't like, I didn't have a death in the family. I didn't have some monumental stuff happening in the background. It just sort of came along. And I think with a lot of people, it does have that. And then with the other books, it's also been a case of sort of people put in extraordinary, not extraordinary, but like extraordinary in terms of our everyday life situations, like relationship problems and stuff like that. And then finding out more about themselves and trying to assert agency over their own journey and where they end up. And I think, a lot of times we tend to navigate life almost on autopilot at times. There's all this stuff we need to do because it's just the reality of our lives. But every now and again, something happens where we stop and reflect and become so self-aware and think, is this the way I should be going? So those books really explore moments in time like that where a character just is roused from their autopilot, for the want of a better term, and then just realizes, is this the way I want to go? How do I make this better? And the reality is most of us will stumble, will fall, we'll make a lot of mistakes and all that, and we'd learn from that sort of stuff. But so my characters try to represent that.
Okay. And in this, you do have a 15-year-old young man at school, unnamed?
Unnamed, yeah.
Why is that?
I just didn't want, I think names come with preconceptions. So, it's like that whole Jerry Seinfeld bit where he talks about if you name your child Jeeves, you've probably, doomed into a life as a butler. And, it wouldn't go sort of quite that far, but it is a thing, like when you say a name, you tend to think of someone immediately, and it might be through your own experiences or however you form those. And I thought, if I can keep him nameless the whole way through, then you never get that prejudice in the way you're inferring the reading. So you can just sort of treat him as this vessel that you can effectively fit into yourself, and just follow him in his journey.
That's fantastic. Well, I wonder whether, given that here in Australia, everyone's nicknamed, everyone's referred to as mate. It does allow for that distance to create that distance with a character.
Yeah. Yeah, I always sort of look at like before I write a book, I really pontificate over the names, and I'll do research on what names mean and all that sort of stuff. And like certain names feel certain ways to me. You know, in Just Norway Suburbia, the protagonist in that is named Casper, and people would say, "Oh, Casper the friendly ghost," and it was like that was actually intentional because it was meant to be this guy who really has, not ineffectual, but he's just has so little agency in his life, and things happen around him and he never reacts, he never asserts himself. So that was actually intentional that, you know, I found a name that represented that. So, and in August Falling, the protagonist is named August because I thought that's a very Roman name, but very regal. And I like the juxtaposition of naming a character who, August, who was not any of those things. And again, like a lot of August particularly, I mean, he dealt with a lot of anxiety also in that story. But so like the names are really, you know, I do a lot of research on them. And if I get things like nicknames and stuff like that, I mean, I try to find the reason behind it, the why behind why are we doing it this way. And sometimes, you know, just not like Suburbia, the protagonist's named Casper and his wife is named Jane, but originally she was Melissa. And I got about a page in, I felt like she doesn't feel like a Melissa.
Interesting.
So she got swapped to a Jane, but then Casper's best friend was Dane, and I thought, I can't really have Jane and Dane. Although I was sort of partly deliberated, is that like a running joke that can happen in the story? But then he got changed also. So, so it's like I really think a lot about how the name's going to figure into the story and what they mean.
Well, speaking of stories and writing, why did you choose to, it's not even a choice, I find with my writing, it just is, what kicked off your writing bug? Why did you need to write?
I'll probably have to go back to the first time I really thought about writing consciously would be about like when I was, well, actually when I was in primary school, I used to really put a lot of work into anything creative. And then when I was about 11 going on 12, I read Lord of the Rings. And for me, that was the sort of like, oh, this is amazing. And it's not just a story, but it's the world building in that story. It's still overwhelming, you know, that all these characters had this lineage going back millennia. You know, every bit of geography had history behind it. And it's like he hasn't just created a story, he's created this this self-sustaining, you know, universe. And one of my complaints, I mean, because I've also worked as an editor, like one of the things I don't like is when I open a book and I read, and it's like none of these characters or none of these places existed before page one. And then you see events and you think, well, surely that came up in their lives a little bit earlier. Why would it? Yeah. So the thing about Lord of the Rings, it was like you're picking up something and you're jumping into, you know, a timeline that's quite advanced, and there's all this history behind it. And obviously that came from all his own research and a lot of the other stuff that he wrote. So when I read that, it was like, you get that that godly feeling of like, geez, I can create a world, I can put people in it, I can give them problems, they can do things. So that was the one that really motivated me. And through high school, anything creative, I had to put a lot of work into. I probably didn't realize I wanted to really be a writer though until about 15, 16. I had a lot of other fantasies, like computer gaming was just finding its way at that time, home computer gaming. I used to think about games, but I'd always think about the stories behind the games. And then I wanted to be a musician at one stage because we had musical people in the family and the cousins. And again, that was when music videos were just really becoming a thing. And again, I started thinking about the stories behind the music videos rather than just the music. And then I gradually realized, oh, hang on, I'm always sort of thinking about the story elements. And so when I was about 15, 16, I hand wrote my first novel, which was a fantasy novel, two A5 exercise books. I was actually at my parents' earlier in the year, and I was just going through the garage, just rifling through stuff, and I found
them.
Yep.
Wonderful.
And I'm looking at it, and I'm just thinking, oh my God. And the writing's terrible. It's very, it's very much trying to copy Tolkien. It's very
Mm.
formal. There's grim people and stuff like that. And the writing itself is just this scrawl. It's like it's really hard to read. But I remember like when I was doing it, I just loved it. You know, it was like every night I would just sit there and I'd write and I'd make up the mythology as I went. None of it made any sense. But like as I was doing it, like I really found that passion to do it, you know, and it's just when you get something like a novel, it's overwhelming because it's so big. And I know a lot of, again, like I said, I've worked as an editor. I know a lot of newer writers or inexperienced writers who struggle because some of it's not as exciting or they fall out of love with the story or whatever. And I just learned from a very early age to just love every moment of it. And sometimes it is a chore, sometimes it feels terrible. You know, life gets in the way of everything. But it was just that whole sense of, you know, creating something from nothing and, you know, maybe creating something that other people would actually enjoy.
Yes, yes. Well, with your research then, with writing, Potter, Pantser, what's your writing style?
More of a pantser, but what I do is I will plan the whole universe before I sit down to write. So
That's impressive.
So I'll have all the geography. I have one unpublished novel. I mean, I do this anyway, but like in one unpublished novel, the structure of the house is really important. So I just scoured the net and found some blueprints that sort of fit in because I needed to know where characters were in relation to each other in this house constantly. I had like a street and like I drew a street with houses on some graph paper and write down all the families that live in every house. And then like I'll write down every character I think I might use, really struggle over their names, give them just a little bit of background. So like I always try and build the world and then drop the story into it. And you know, like in workshops I've run, I always say, it's like if I tell you to go somewhere you've never been before, if you don't have any idea about any of this, you'll just get lost and you'll hit dead ends and you'll probably end up giving up. But if I give you a map, it'll inform the direction you go. You'll have adventures along the way. So that's what I find the backgrounding is like. And then I'll have a general idea of what I think I want to do. I mean, sometimes it evolves and goes in a different direction. Other times it really surprises me. I think, that's connecting up in that way. I didn't actually even, you know, that was going to happen. So
It's magic when that does happen, though.
it's awesome. Yeah. So I mean, thinking some part of my brain's working better at this than, you know, my conscious part. So like I do all the backgrounding as much as possible because I think a lot of times when people get stuck, it's simply because they don't know their world well enough, or they have to stop to do research, or, you know, like they're in a cafe and it's like, oh, what's the cafe and who are the people who work here and what are the names here and stuff like that. And I know some people use the band-aid fixes of like, I'll just call the character X for now and then fix it later. But I find like if I know all that, then it really directs which way the story goes.
Yep. No, that's I find that's really helpful too. It's interesting to me that a lot of the books that you've mentioned in regard to when you really kicked off and started writing were very fantasy and epic fantasy driven.
Yeah.
But you're right, contemporary.
Yeah, well, when I was probably like a lot of young male teens, I read, I mean, not obviously not exclusive to male teens, but like a lot of male teens I knew back then were reading fantasy. So I read Lord of the Rings and fell in love with that. And then I read sort of stuff that probably I shouldn't have even been reading at the time, like Scarlet Pimpernel and Robin Hood and Ivanhoe and all this. And it was all very formal. You know, I mean, you read Tolkien, it's very dense and descriptive. And I thought that's the way you need to write. And like all my early stuff represents that. But then when I read Catch in the Rye, I was like, oh, okay, that's quite different. But like I wrote handwrote that fantasy novel, then I typed it out on the typewriter because home computers weren't really, well, home computers with word processors weren't things, they were gaming computers. But then home computers started to come in. My brother bought a PC, so then I typed it out as like on a word processor. And so I kept rewriting this thing, trying to get it better and better. But then I got to the point, like, again, there's no internet. So this is talking about like 1990. There was no internet for me to just Google. There's no Google. It's the Google, you know, publishers. And what do I do with it? You're left to the white pages and the yellow pages. And it's like, I don't even know what I'm looking for. And there was no one to speak to. So, and then I started thinking, well, I've written a book and it's meant to be book one of the 4-book series.
Oh, wow.
So I had it all planned. I had prequels and sequels all planned, and
Brilliant.
you know, had all my like posthumous stuff planned. Like I think one day I'll die and my children will release all these notes like Tolkien. I had all these grand ideas about what was going to happen. And then I thought, well, it's probably going to be hard for an unknown to get a 4-book, or get the first book published of a 4-book series. So I wrote another one, a fantasy epic, and that was like 260,000 words.
Wow.
And then I sort of got into screenwriting for a bit. So I moved away from fantasy. And then when I got back to like prose, it was like, well, I've been in screenwriting for a bit and I've been writing more contemporary stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so the prose, it seemed like a natural transition of that. And then I just sort of facilitated between the two. I've always wanted to go back to that second fantasy, the fantasy epic. And last year when I had a break from Christmas, I grabbed the book and I split it in 4. And I challenged myself to rewrite the first part. And I was thinking, hopefully, that it would need work, but it wouldn't need much work. But it was effectively a word one rewrite, and just sort of reading it, it's like, oh my God, this is so terrible. All these things I would tell people not to do. But I mean, it was also sort of fun to look at it. And I actually, because at the stage when I did that, I was just a little bit sort of tired from writing and all that, just because of working and all that, or just working so hard on that. And I actually rediscovered quite a passion, because I was just writing that story. It reminded me of like just writing for the love of writing, and thinking that everything you're writing is the smartest, grandest thing ever written. We all have that view of our own work while we're doing it. It's not until revision that we sort of look again. What was I thinking? What was I doing? So yeah, but I mean, I'd still like to go back to fantasy one day. I've read in that book once, so I'm thinking maybe every Christmas I'll do another part of it.
Another section. That sounds
Yeah.
brilliant. Oh, fantastic. Well, I mean, I guess we all have to start somewhere, don't we, when it comes to our writing?
Yeah.
What a journey.
Yeah. I mean, I can't remember which writer it was. Some writer said, write 1,000,000 words and then throw them away. So I think I'm well past that now. But the throwing away, I'm not quite well past. So sometimes you still feel like that.
Well, you mentioned the screenplays. So
Yeah.
storytelling, it's all storytelling. How did you choose to move into that, or to have that focus?
Well, when I was 20-ish, I did some drama classes, and there was a director there, and I just said, would you be interested in some screenplays if I gave them to you? And he said, put them in my hand, I'll read them. And I had no idea what to do. And, no internet. So I went to the library. There was no books on screenwriting. There was one book on playwriting. I thought, well, it's got to be something similar. And I wrote 2 screenplays, like I just banged them out and gave them to him. And he said, you can write. But he goes, I don't like the stories, but you can write. And,
wow, well, that's a fascinating compliment to
Yeah.
receive at that age.
Yeah, and he commissioned me to write a screenplay for him.
Wow.
I did a terrible job of it because I was 20, 21. I thought I knew better than him what he wanted. So that was a really early lesson. So after that, there was like always a foot in that world, and sometimes opportunities nothing's been made into a feature film or anything yet, but like there was opportunities, but it's an interesting thing because you evolve, but it also teaches you a lot about writing, because sometimes I've adapted screenplays to novels, and sometimes I've adapted novels to screenplays, and it's really interesting how certain things work the same, but how other things don't work anything alike. In a novel, I can have a character sitting on a chair for 3 pages just thinking about his life. In a screenplay, that's not going to make very interesting. It's not going to make a very interesting scene. So you got to think about how things are portrayed quite differently in screenwriting. But also on the flip side, you look at like how you shape scenes, and a lot of that screenwriting stuff, it becomes really helpful because you visualize it cinematically about how it would play out and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, I was actually going, so many writers, so many authors, myself included, we all have that dream that is to have our books turned into a major motion picture and be a blockbuster. So it's really interesting how you the way you've said that the descriptions you have in your books do need to be visualized.
Yeah.
And just brevity being the key with screenplays. So
yeah, and my screenplays tend to be overwritten. So I mean, I've been teaching myself to chop more. They don't. because again, it is a visual element. And then, I mean, the biggest difference is when you write a novel, when you write prose, it really is an individualistic journey. And even though like people like editors that will come on board, the editor should really be helping you realize your vision. They shouldn't be coming in and saying, no, you got to totally change all this and do this and do this. Whereas in screenwriting, it's a collaborative effort because you have other people that come on board, like directors and producers and casting and all that sort of stuff, location scouts. So it becomes, the product of many parents. So when you don't want to sort of, or you can't really treat it like the way you treat a novel.
So with your novels,
yeah,
do you bring any of your now grown screenplay skills into your scene setting, into your location descriptions?
I've always been sort of relatively sparse with my prose. I'm my teenage years aside, I'm not trying to be Tolkien. But yeah, I tend to be, I don't know, someone once said to read Cormac McCarthy years ago, because I was told you sort of not have a similar style, but in terms of the way you describe things, you tend to be Spartan and all that sort of stuff. So the one thing I think I really bring in, like I said, is just cinematically visualizing how the scene would operate. So it's like starting with the biggest lens on the scene and then just sort of coming in slowly. Or other times they're looking at scenes, because sometimes with scenes they just drop you straight into it. Whereas with a novel, sometimes you're setting up the scene and before you get the actual action of it and all that sort of stuff. I mean, it's really sort of what works best for both mediums. Sometimes you get stuck on scenes, and the thing I think that helps in screenwriting is it really teaches you to look at things from a different angle. So instead of looking at it from here, let's push it back a scene, or let's push it back a few seconds, or let's change the focus from the character to something they're doing, or stuff like that.
Okay. So with your first drafts then, what do you find as your biggest, when you put your editing hat on, biggest bugbear? What is coming out in your first draft that you need to pull back on?
There's certain things that all writers do. I shouldn't say all, but most writers do.
Yep.
So the biggest one I find is a reliance on eyes, and like eyes and as in seeing, and looking, gaze, stared, all these sort of synonyms like that. They're constantly popping up, and it's connecting the characters to their location and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of those that pop up. And I have like a list of words that I overuse. Felt is another one, realize is another one. And then because the first couple of times I'll go through it, I'll really just be going through it to try and fill the story out as best as I can. And I'll fix the prose if I see something that really leaps out at me, but it's not my focus at that immediate time, because I dedicate different edits to different things.
Okay.
So later on, there'll be edits that are just dedicated solely to the prose and just weeding all that stuff out. But like I think as you learn what your bad habits are, it really hones your writing, so you're not committing them as often. But I mean, at the end of when I start to look at like these words I've overused and stuff like that, I'll actually run a find and highlight all of them. So, and then as I'm reading, I'll see them, and then it's like, okay, do I really need that? And sometimes you do, but other times it'll be like, no, if I rejig it this way, it sounds better, and I get rid of this repetition.
Do you find that when reading it back, it is sound that you pick up on, that it sounds right, doesn't sound right, something's not working, I can't work out what that is, it's a sound?
When I feel like I don't like the one I'm currently working on sort of became so big in terms of scope that I really struggled to conceptualize it at all. And it was one I wrote when I went back to work after the COVID years. So I was really, working a pretty big day and then coming home and only having a bit of time to write. So like I really wrote it in dribs and drabs of like, sometimes it's like 50 words a day. So I really didn't get a great sense of it, a sense of, the whole, a bigger interpretation of what was happening. It was always sort of these like tidbits that I was looking at and I'm thinking, is this working? for the rest of the stuff. So sometimes I'll actually use structural maps, and that gives me a really good idea of what I've overused. So that's what I'm doing at the moment. Like I'm structurally mapping it out because it really just gives you a blueprint for how the book works and what's coming up too much, what you might have been too sparse on. Stuff that's been repeated, stuff that doesn't connect anywhere. And it also just gives you an idea of density. Sometimes you look at it and you think, I really mentioned this for 5-6 chapters, and then it just disappears for 10. And so you really get it's about as close as you can get to sort of a visual graphic of how a book works.
Oh, that's fantastic. So almost storyboarding in a way.
Yeah, reverse engineering it. So you're looking at it from, okay, that's what it is. This is what the parts that make it up.
Okay. And where do you write when you write your 50 to 100 or more words a day?
Oh, I got a little study window that overlooks a tiny backyard. And when I'm writing at night, the possums leap on the fence and scare the hell out of me. I'm sort of used to them now, but yeah, they're big fellas. When I first moved to this area, the first few times that happened, I was like, is someone jumping over the fence here? And I don't know if you've
They
ever
are
heard
loud. Oh yeah, they are loud.
and then when they breathe, they got that Darth Vader thing happening.
Yes.
It's like, what is this?
Particularly if you're outside, doing whatever you might be doing outside. Ooh, it's a bit creepy.
Oh, it is. I mean, some years ago, a friend came over and we just went outside because he's a smoker. And it was late at night, and the possum jumped on the fence and was just walking along the fence and just stopped and looked at us like, "What are you two doing out here?" So so I have a little study, and I just sit down and I might do a bit of procrastination for the first 5 to 10 minutes, and then slowly get into it. But I mean, I also keep a word count journal, so that really helps. And that's just every day I'll have a spreadsheet with a date and then how many words I did that day, and then how many words I'm up to. And that really helps because when you look at it, sometimes when you're doing those little 70s and 50s and 20s, you're thinking, okay, I need to do something bigger. I need to get this working a little bit quicker. So it really helps map it out in your head in terms of how much you're building this story. And then like I'll have another column. Sometimes there'll be legitimate reasons why you couldn't write, something will come up. But then other times you can also, like I'll also jot down sometimes if there's an excuse. I'll say, I went and read Wikipedia for 45 minutes because there's some interesting scene about, I don't know, the Batman from the 1960s
Lost
or
down
something.
the rabbit hole.
Yeah. So,
research.
but then again, when I see that, it motivates me to go, okay. But it also helps because when you see it go from the hundreds to the thousands to the tens of thousands, that becomes a motivator in itself. It's like, okay, cool, I'm underway. It's like when you take a long journey and at the start of it, it just seems there's so much ahead of you. But then when you actually get into the meat of it, it's like, okay, we're actually underway here. We're really going somewhere.
Oh, fantastic. And so your journey to publication then, what steps would you recommend to, say, an author starting out? What advice would you be able to give in relation to how you found your publishers or just in general?
The first thing would really be to revise. I see a lot of inexperienced authors who hand in like first, second drafts, and I can guarantee the first, second draft's going to be rough. So revise and revise and revise. And the other reason to revise is because when you submit, you're really only going to get one shot at submitting to a publisher. So if they see something that's rough and then 6 months later you go, look, I've worked on it, would you look at it again? They're going to say, no. We have a ton of other submissions to read. I mean, and sometimes the publisher might come back and say, look, if you rework it, we'll look at it, but that's really rare. So, you're going to get one shot at submitting. So make sure it's the very best work it could possibly be. Get people to read it who you trust, not necessarily family, because they will either be really cruel or really overly
kind.
sympathetic. Yeah.
Yep.
So but people who also get what you're doing, so people, you can go to workshop groups, and I find that's it can be a double-edged sword. You can find people who are really great, but then in the same group, you can find people who are really damaging or just simply don't get what you're doing. And you wouldn't go to a workshop group that specializes in romance because you're writing a high fantasy, so you're not going to get the feedback you want. So in time, you'll actually learn who you can trust, who you can rely on, whose feedback you really value. If you can afford to get a manuscript assessment, that can help. And then sometimes, or not sometimes, a lot of times I just say, just put it away for a while and then go back to it after several months with fresh eyes, and you'll be amazed at the things you see. And when you're totally sure you can get nothing more of it and it's in a good shape, then start submitting. Uh, that's really just a journey of perseverance. Fortunately, I mean, when when I learned a lot more about publishing in my 30s and that, so it took me quite a while, but people were still using snail mail at that time. And now email is the case for pretty much almost everyone. And back in the snail mail days, a lot of the publishers said, we just want exclusive submissions. So if you're submitting, you can only be submitting to us. And, you could lie, but I mean, there's always a chance you're going to get found out, and that's not going to be great. But nowadays with email, you can submit to multiple places. They just want to be notified if you move up the food chain somewhere. But it really is just a case of perseverance and just, you are going to get rejected. That's the reality. But, don't take it personally. It's just part of, I mean, it's one of the most demoralizing aspirations to be a writer, because you will get rejected time and time and time and time again. And then even when you get accepted, then there's things like reviews and sales and all that sort of stuff. And you're putting something out that's intensely personal, even if it feels like a story that's not like a fantasy novel, you're still putting all yourself in that. So you really need to develop thick skin and just don't worry about the naysayers. Just keep pushing, keep submitting. There's a lot of great opportunities now. There's a lot of comps now that sort of give publishers first look at new writers. So that's always really, really helpful. But otherwise, just keep submitting. I mean, my first book took 15 years from between writing the first draft and the one that was ultimately picked up. But then having said that too, people say that's a long time. If it was picked up earlier, it never would have been the book that it ended up becoming. So that was actually a godsend. I recall, it's probably about 2015 or something. I nearly had another novel picked up. And I remember how the spirit I was when it was. And that would have been my first novel picked up. And then years later, because you're always developing as a writer, but years later, it was like, I'm so glad that wasn't picked up, because that would have, when I looked at it, as like, this shouldn't have been out in public. This would have been an embarrassment for me. So, and that all again factors into, really push yourself with your craft and all that, but also, things come to you in their right time.
So a 15-year journey. How did you end up submitting? What got you over the line?
Well, this one was so this was a mixed one, because it was, my friend owns a publisher and she fell in love with the story in about '08, I think it was, and she really wanted to publish it, but because we were real close friends, I just felt it was like I thought she might be biased. And I submitted it around and I was getting really good rejections, but they were still rejections, and she kept wanting to publish it. And in the end, I just said, well, I found this one person who believes in my writing. Why am I constantly saying no? So I mean, that one was like a bit more of a personal journey in that regard. And then she published it in the same year. I had that was a Lazaros Zigomanis novel. So that's my young adult moniker. It's actually the name I was baptized under. But then the other novel, the Les Zig one, that was published a few months later, and that was just, again, perseverance. Like, every publisher in the country had actually turned it down, although a few of them gave me really, really good feedback and just said, we really like it, we just don't feel we're going to be able to sell it. So, and I'm not having a shot at those publishers. Like, I think that can be a bit of a cop out at times too, because there's plenty of examples of books that have been rejected multiple times and then taken off elsewhere. So obviously, and Harry Potter is always the best example because of how many times that was rejected. But you look at something like that and it was picked up ultimately and became what it is, you'd have to think every other publisher who knocked it back, who thought there was nothing in it, would be going, oh, well, we weren't right about that. And there's plenty of those sort of stories. There's plenty of stories, of books that they have really backed which haven't worked out. So I think there's a place for every story out there. It's just sort of finding your audience. And I think now with the internet and stuff like that, it's still a challenge for any writer, but you have access to a world now, whereas pre-internet, pre-digital technology and stuff like that, you really only had access to your sort of, your immediate surrounds. And if you were published in Victoria, you might get your tendrils into the other states and all that sort of stuff, but it mightn't be with the same influence that you can do now, because you have social media, you have the internet, you have a lot of platforms, you have podcasts. There's so many opportunities now to really get your name and your stories out there.
Yeah. Do you think it's almost getting to an overwhelming point with just how much is out there?
Yeah. I know, because I went back to study as a mature age student over 20 years ago, and at that time they really like what they were advising students, writers, was like, go get a blog, and then it was go do social media.
Yep.
And
get your brand up.
Yeah, and one of the things I hear is, I still hear that as an advice, and it's like, that was really good advice 20 years ago when no one was doing it. Everyone's doing it now, and you still should do it, but you're a voice in the crowd, and it's like, how do you break out from that crowd? And I mean, the reality with art, and this is the really difficult thing, is being good doesn't actually guarantee any success. You can have a great story, it can be the best written thing in the world, but once you release it, it's up to the whims of tastes and timing and all that sort of stuff. Whereas, in any other field, if you're a great footballer, you'll rise to the top, you'll command the big dollars. If you're a great landscaper, people are going to talk about you and get, so with writing or any art form, you're really at the mercy of taste and all that sort of stuff. So all you can do is keep pushing and hope, you develop that groundswell that breaks into something meaningful. And I think ultimately it will happen for people if they keep putting their stuff out there. But having said that, if you're going to do it, just make sure, because self-publishing is really a thing now too, which is great. But I've seen some people who do it, and they do it by skipping steps. And by skipping steps, I mean like they won't get editing done, or they'll lay it out in Word or something like that, which, Microsoft Word can do a job, but it's going to look like it's laid out in Microsoft Word.
Yeah.
And I've known a couple of people in the past who say, nobody will care if there's a few spelling errors because the idea is so good. And it's like, no, they will care, because it's like, watching a film and spotting the boom light, dipping into the, from the top of the frame.
Yeah.
Once you see that, it's like, that just shattered my suspension of disbelief. And in a book, you spot one error, you go, okay, I'll forgive it, that one error. But you spot a second one, it's like, what? I'm no longer reading the story to enjoy the story. I'm now reading it so I can spot all these errors and probably go rant at my other literary friends tomorrow about all these mistakes I found. So, whichever way you do it, because they're both totally viable, just make sure you give yourself every best chance of succeeding.
Now, you mentioned football just a moment ago, and I have to mention to our listeners what you can't see that you could see if you were watching on YouTube.
I could see that one there.
Yes, we have a lot of magpie memorabilia in the background here of Les's office. But for those that are watching, I'm sure you've noticed all of the Collingwood bits and pieces. But yes, you have to see this amazing. Oh, and you mentioned podcasts, so you actually have a football podcast.
Yeah, me and my friend, known as Spook. So I have a nickname of Sly. We've been doing a Collingwood podcast since about 2018. It sort of started as a little bit of a joke, because Collingwood was just doing so poorly in that period. And we thought, oh, well, no one else is doing this. So we started, and that was the year they came good. It was like 4 years out of the finals, and they came good in that fifth year. And they made a grand final and typically lost it. So, and we've just been doing that ever since. And, we have a small but dedicated following. Being older supporters, we've lived through a lot of the bad history and stuff like that. So we tend to poke fun at ourselves, tend to be pretty self-deprecating about the club itself. We don't take ourselves too seriously. So, and there are other podcasts out there which are great, but I mean, I think with us, I think we're actually the oldest for the Collingwood ones that exist. I think we're the oldest host. So we've seen a lot of the Collingwood tragedy. So, I mean, if you don't know anything about Collingwood, they've got a history of getting there and losing in some heartbreaking fashion. So, I mean, last year, for them to win, it's like we still say, I can't believe they actually won in those circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I certainly understand the magpie tragedy as well as triumph, given half of my family are magpie supporters. A lot of my friends are Carlton, so we won't go into that too much for fear of you cancelling the interview on me.
Oh, it's funny because my oldest brother, so I'm the youngest of four, and my oldest brother asked him, why do you go for Collingwood? And he said that in grade prep, there was some girl he liked and she went for Collingwood. And I
Yep.
think he consigned us all the tragedy because of that. And not just us, but like I have cousins and all that who go for Collingwood and all that. So
Oh, Australian rules football, for anyone who's listening from out of Australia, it is a big part of our life, particularly in the southern states. But
yeah.
moving on from Collingwood, I will mention actually that you're coming to me today from the same country that I am actually. So we're both in Wurundjeri Wurrung country, and about 35 minutes perhaps between our two locations, I believe tonight, Les.
My geography is terrible. It'll be about an hour for me because I would get lost, even
Yeah.
with Google Maps.
Now, tell me, how can we find you if we're looking for more information on you?
So I have a website, www.leszig.com, and you can find me on Facebook under that name also, and LinkedIn and Twitter under Les Zig. And I'm on Instagram, but I don't really use it as a literary platform. It's just more of a sort of jokey thing that I do.
No problems. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It has been absolutely marvelous talking to you and listening to you speak. We'll give the magpies a side shove for now. But thank you very much for your time. And yes, if you are looking to grab some of Les's books, you will be able to get them from most of the good online stores as well as.
Yeah, this should still be in physical bookstores. The others
Excellent.
will all be available at online retailers.
Wonderful. Well, this is the latest of your novels. I have to ask very quickly, the title, this, does that ever trip you up at all?
Has a few times we've referenced it, so but it's good because it's unique. So
Absolutely.
I always look for striking titles, and that one when I was writing it was like that sums everything up. So
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right about that. So grab a copy of this and jump on the website and have a look at Les's bio. It is absolutely fascinating, and the number of awards and competitions you have under your belt for your screenwriting is absolutely extraordinary. So congratulations on
thank
all of
you.
that and on the novels. And is there something coming up soon?
I'm working
Something
on
new?
2 novels, or sorry, revisions. So like I tend to stack things up and I put them aside, and then I'll write something new and I'll go back to the revisions in time. So I'm working on which is actually an adaptation of the screenplay. It's a sci-fi post-apocalyptic novel set in Australia, and it's meant to be this
I'm already
really,
hooked.
yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is, like, I love sci-fi, so I'm a huge
Mhm.
sci-fi fan. But the thing that always strikes me is whenever you watch sci-fi, it always happens in the US.
Yep.
Yeah, so I was like, I want to do something in Australia, and I want to use like landmarks in Australia as part of the iconography. It's like at the end of the Planet of the Apes, which I won't ruin for people who haven't seen it, the original Planet of the Apes. But there's that one scene where you think
Moment.
that's just brilliant, yeah. And that's what I wanted to do with Australia, because I think there's some great places that you could make look fantastic in a post-apocalyptic world. So, and it's partly a road trip, so it starts in Queensland and comes to Victoria. So there's a lot of places they go through.
I'm definitely hooked. I need to read this now.
And that's one where it sort of incorporates popular conspiracy theories and mythologies and that, like about lizards from the fifth dimension and stuff like that. I don't know much people know about that. And then there's a novella I'm working on with, revising again, and that's pretty close to finish. But that's
Fantastic.
it's about a love triangle, but I tried to polarize the outcomes because those sort of stories tend to go one way, and I really tried to invert that. So I don't know if I've succeeded or not, but hopefully I have.
Well, we'll definitely be looking forward to that one too. Well, thank you once again for your time and for speaking to us here at Australian Book Lovers, and hopefully we'll get a chance to chat again.
thank you, Laurie, for having me on. And
Right.
thank you to Australian book lovers.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Les, and thank you to Laurie for your brilliant first interview. Well, and not your first interview, but your first interview with us
Yes,
in
yes,
this
through
season.
that's
Yeah.
right, through
Yeah.
Australian Book Lovers. So that was
Yes.
very exciting, and Les is
Yeah.
just wonderful to talk to. We could have talked a lot
So many
longer, and
things.
absolutely, so
Yeah.
versatile as a writer.
Yes, yeah, contemporary fantasy, all sorts of things. I love him talking about characters trying to find their place in the world, asserting agency over their lives. I think that resonated, really
Yeah.
quite a lot.
Yeah, and the growing up Australian, but with Macedonian and Greek parents and
Yeah.
culture and just that difference with schools and
Yes.
how that interaction is very it forms you as a kid at school and with your
Yeah.
friends. So
Yeah.
and also the mental health focus.
Yes.
It was
Yeah.
fascinating to listen to
Yeah.
him talk.
Yeah, I really like that. Lord of the Rings, of course. Fan of the Lord of the Rings. What can we say? That gives him a tick in my book.
Yep.
And leaving a legacy for kids to release
Yeah.
when you die. Yeah, that was interesting.
Yeah.
And Australian dystopian landmarks is
Yes. Yeah, and the 80s, which
And the
I
80s.
was immediately flashing back to so many different things from school when we when we were chatting. So
Yeah.
love the 80s. Oh,
Yes, definitely love the
Long
80s.
time
I don't know
ago.
whether the 80s love me. I looked at some of the photos the other day. Husband was looking for some
Hairstyles?
photos of somebody. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of hair in those
There's a
days.
lot of hair.
A lot of hair. But it was the one time when my hair was fashionable, because really, in the 70s, not so much. But then I think Farrah Fawcett made the big curly hair. Even though she didn't have curls, she made the curly hair.
I had a lot of crimping
famous.
and
Yes.
scrunchies. A lot of crimping and scrunchies. Yep. Yep.
Now it's just keeping it short so that it's under control. All right. Fabulous. So
Yes.
all of Les's books are on the website. Please have a look, and
Yes.
there will be something for everyone in there because he has so many books there.
Absolutely.
What have you got for a quote?
For a quote. Okay. So I had that on my screen just a second ago. Okay.
Oh, here's my quote. Yeah.
So I've got one here from Neil Gaiman, who is one of my favorite writers. So the one thing that you have that nobody else has is you, your voice, your mind, your story, your vision. So write and draw and build and play and dance and live as only you can. And I really love that one.
Yeah. Who was that from?
From Neil Gaiman.
From Neil Gaiman.
That one.
Yeah. Yeah. The pearls that fall from that man's lips
Oh,
is
my goodness.
and off and onto the page is
Yes.
absolutely fantastic.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
I thought that was good because really, particularly with your writing, even if, because I do so many of the prompt responses with Friday Fictioneers, same photo, but every single person who writes to that prompt, every story is different. And even the ones with similar themes are still so completely different. And it really shows that you might have a prompt or something that is similar to something else out there, but only you can tell your story.
Yes.
Based on that. So I love that advice.
This is good. All right, I've got something from Catherine Mansfield, who is an Australian and New Zealand writer and critic, who died some time ago. She was born in 1888 in Wellington, New Zealand, and she died on the 9th of January 1923 in Fontainebleau in France. So there you go. I love this one. The mind I love must have wild places, a tangled orchard where dark damsons drop in the heavy grass, an overgrown little wood, the chance of a snake or two, a pool that nobody's fathomed the depth of, and paths threaded with flowers planted by the mind.
Oh, wow.
I really love that.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, I was reminded of, just thinking, Les talking about agency and finding yourself, and I thought that, she owned that wild, crazy place in her mind that was, for her, it was beautiful and just heavy with everything. And I thought, that was nice.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. That's nice.
Yeah. All good. All right. Well, I think we're at the
I
end.
think we've got to the end.
We have got to the end. So
Amazing.
don't forget, if you're a reader and you want to jump onto the semi-regular newsletter and win one of these books, get onto australianbooklovers.com/booklovers and subscribe.
Yep.
You'll find us on Twitter, X, at Australian Books. We're on Instagram and Threads at Australian Book Lovers. We're on LinkedIn and YouTube. So please tick, follow, like, all those kind of things. So lots of places to discover us.
Are you on Blue Sky yet, Veronica?
No.
Oh, we need to get on Blue Sky. I'm loving Blue Sky. That's fun too.
Oh, are you? Okay,
There's
well,
so
perhaps
many
I could
going.
handball Blue Sky to
Oh
you.
yes, well I have been for those lovely Blue Sky followers. I've
Yeah.
definitely been shouting out a lot of Australian book lovers info on there as well.
Excellent.
There's too many to keep track of, isn't there?
Well, there is, yeah. And I spent so long yesterday. I was thinking, oh, but when do I get to do my writing again? Anyway, you can remember that we celebrate and support Aussie authors and readers. So it's readers and writers from all places around Australia, and indie, hybrid, traditional, whatever. We're really happy to support you. And did you know that you can share the love and support the AVL podcast with a once-off or a monthly donation from as little as $3 a month? Cancel anytime, no commitment, but it really does. Those few dollars really do help get the podcast out. And thank you so much to our subscribers, including, dare I say it, one of my co-hosts here today. Thank you so much for your subscription. It does really help.
Yes, and also don't forget we've got merch
Oh,
on the
we've got
merch page on our Aussie Book Lovers website. Yes, so do jump on, and there's reader ones and writer ones. So for the authors out there, we've got author ones.
Author ones. And what have I got in this one? Have I got reader?
Yes.
Oh, no, I've just got the plain logo. But anyway, there you go. Yes, books, caps,
yes,
clothing,
mugs, coffee mugs,
mouse mats, everything. You know, all sorts of things that you can get.
So
blanket scarves. Some of them are a little bit odd, but yeah. But anyway, support us.
And tell people and just go to the website and read about all our amazing Aussie books.
Yeah, and we have hundreds and hundreds of books there, and more coming every day. And I will, if you've sent me one recently, I will get to them. I promise you, this weekend, every last one is going to get up, which is fantastic.
That is wonderful. All right.
I think that's it.
Tagline?
We will finish with the book review later and tagline. Are you ready?
Yes, indeed. So,
what do we have to remember, Laurie?
Take care for now, and remember to
read more Aussie books.
Bye for now.
Thank you. Bye. This is a review of Blackbirch, The Collector by K.M. Allan. Now, that is the fourth book in the Blackbirch series, and as you will see, I've got the beginning, the dark half, the ritual, and the collector, which is book 4 in the series. Fantastic. I've watched that grow over the years, and K.M. Allan is one of the 6 a.m. Oz writers. So here we go. Blackbirch, the Collector is brilliant. K.M. Allan and the supernatural town of Blackbirch blew in like the storm that sets up the opening of this fourth book. It's more action-packed and loaded with plot twists and turns, as well as the magic being bigger and wilder. A fitting, page-turning finale to a great YA series. Allan's prose gets stronger and stronger, and her storytelling more complex and compelling with each outing. I found the Blackbirch characters, the primary and secondary, were even more relatable, and their world-changing adventures saw much deeper insights into themselves and each other. Plus, Josh, Kelly, Sarah and Max have matured in their words and deeds, only natural given the events of books 1, 2 and 3. That's not to say there was no betrayal, Eve, and heart-wrenching scenes in the plot. Enough said. What I love the most is the slick way the supernatural slides through this contemporary tale. It could be happening in any town, albeit one with a spooky Blackbirch forest, some witchy connections, and a big bad lurking in a mysterious clearing, or it was. You'll have to read Blackbirch, the Collector, to find out what happens. All in all, a fantastic final instalment. I am going to miss Blackbirch, an excellent read.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.
Let's meet again, where magic happens.